Welcome to Humble Beginnings, the Undrafted Podcast. I am your host, Roushell Hamilton Jr. Thank you for taking time out of your busy day or night, whatever time you're listening to this. Thank you for taking time out of your life, basically, to come and hang out with me for a little bit. I'm Roushell Hamilton Jr. I'm the creator, owner, producer, whatever you want to call it, of this podcast. This is something that comes as a suggestion from a program director of a radio station out in Tennessee, Mr. Wells Guthrie. So this is just something that I'm taking a leap of faith and I'm just going to run with it. So first and foremost, I want to thank God for giving me the opportunity to do something like this, for giving me the gift of speaking, public speaking, communications, however you want to put it. I want to thank God for giving me this opportunity and allowing me to be able to do something like this. Like I said, this is a leap of faith. I don't know how this is going to work, but we're going to take it and we're going to run with it. Just to give you a little bit about me and tell you a little bit about myself. I'm from Amarillo, Texas originally. Currently, I live in the DFW area. I love sports. I'm a big Broncos fan. Anybody that knows me knows I love the Denver Broncos. Football is my favorite sport by far. It's my passion, or one of my passions. I love the Ninja Turtles. Michelangelo is my boy. That's my favorite one. Like I said, I already said I'm from Amarillo, Texas. I went to school at West Texas A&M University. I got a bachelor's degree in mass communications. Emphasis was in broadcasting. I've worked in the news industry. I've worked in the transportation industry. Currently work in the transportation industry. I've worked with airlines. My experience is all over the place. So, like I said, this is something that I'm going to take and I'm going to run with. So just bear with me. Still trying to get the bearings of this whole thing, and this is a leap of faith, and I'm just going to jump. Steve Harvey said it best. Sometimes you have to just jump and just go with the flow, basically. So with all that being said, let me tell you a little bit about the podcast. This podcast will focus mainly on football. We'll talk sports. We'll talk, baseball. We'll talk a little bit about basketball. I don't know a whole lot about basketball. I'm just going to be honest with you. I'm a big LeBron James fan, but outside of that, I don't know a lot about basketball. So we'll try to get some people on here who do know a lot about basketball and have some discussions, and maybe I'll learn a little bit, maybe you'll learn a little bit. And if anybody out there wants to come talk basketball with me, feel free. Anyway, we're going to talk mainly about football. We'll touch the NFL. We'll touch some college, touch some high school. Arena League football is going on right now. We have two teams here in the Dallas-Fort Worth area that whose season just started. The Dallas Marshals, who play down in the Fair Park Coliseum in South Dallas, and the Texas Revolution, who play up at the Dr. Pepper Arena up in Frisco. So we'll talk a little bit about them. We'll go out to some of their games and check them out. I've never been to any of them, but I'm really looking forward to that because Arena League football is amazing. It's a lot of fun, and I thoroughly enjoy it. But right now, we got the big story in the NFL right now is the Combine just wrapped up last week. We got the draft coming up next month. Free agency starts next week, and with the Broncos, I'll just jump right into it. A lot of moving parts with the Broncos going on right now. They traded Aqib Talib to the Rams for a 5th-round pick, which we all knew that Aqib Talib was going to be on the move in the offseason, either through a release or through a trade. We all heard on the newswire that the Broncos were going to have Talib up for trade. He was going to be trade bait. So we all knew that 2017 was his last season in Denver, and either the Broncos were going to trade him or they were going to release him. So they tried to trade him to the 49ers. Talib nixed that. He did not want to play there. The Patriots were definitely one of the teams that were on his list. Denver made some calls, and finally the Rams bit, and they gave Denver a 5th-round pick for Talib, which really, when you consider the circumstances of this situation, is not a bad trade-off because Denver gets to get rid of his $11 million salary, and the Rams get a guy who's he's not as fast and not as quick as he used to be, but he's a guy who's on the tail end of being in the prime of his career. So they still get a really, really good corner. He reunites with Wade Phillips out in Los Angeles. And the Rams, they just traded for Marcus Peters a few weeks ago. So on the outside, they have Marcus Peters and Aqib Talib, two of the best corners in the league, locking down the outside. So their defense is going to be fire next season. So the Broncos get a 5th-round pick for Aqib Talib, which gives them a total of 11 picks in the draft. So John Elway is licking his chops right now. With 11 picks, you can either get 11 impact players, or you can use those 11 picks and trade up and trade down, grab more picks, however you want to work it. You could even In some cases, you might make a draft day trade and trade a pick for a player. You can do a lot of different things with 11 picks. So we've seen teams like New England work miracles with their draft capital. So, the Denver Broncos have a great opportunity in front of them right now. I know Wade Phillips is happy to get one of his guys back. Wade Phillips loved Aqib Talib and the rest of the guys on defense when he was in Denver in 2015 and 2016. He loved them and they loved him. They absolutely loved Wade, and fans loved Wade. I loved Wade. So it's really good to see Aqib get to reunite with Wade Phillips, who is, a great defensive mind. So it's the worst kept secret in the National Football League that the Broncos were going to go after Kirk Cousins. I mean, when you look at their quarterback play from the last two seasons, especially last season, they were second to only the Cleveland Browns as far as their turnover rate. And, I'm not even going to go into detail about how bad the quarterback play was. We saw on film what happened with Trevor Siemian and Brock Osweiler and the entire quarterback situation in Denver. It was dismal. It was abysmal, however you want to put it. Anything opposite of good, that's what the Denver quarterback situation was. Trevor Siemian, Trevor Siemian, I don't even know how to say it because I had high hopes for Trevor. And the first few weeks of the season, I was really thinking like, man, this dude, we could build something with this guy. He seems like he might have the tools. He definitely seems like he has the smarts. He wasn't turning the ball over. He came out slinging it. I heard all the arguments about him not having the deep ball and not having, the touch and this and that and the other. But I was like, that's something that could be coached. And, man, it was like after week 3, Trevor Siemian just fell off the deep end, which sucks because he's a great guy. By all accounts, he's a great young man. He's a great person. And he's somebody that you definitely like having in your locker room as far as personality goes. But you know how it is in the NFL. If you're not getting it done on the field, they don't have any use for you. This is a what have you done for me lately type of league. And Trevor Siemian just did not get it done. And then, in comes Brock Osweiler, which I don't even know why Denver even bothered calling this dude back. We saw what happened with him in Houston. We saw how he left Denver and the way he acted. So me personally, I would not have called Brock Osweiler. I was all about the Broncos getting Colin Kaepernick in last offseason, but that fell through. So, it is what it is. And speaking of Kaepernick, not even going to go into that situation as to why this young man is even out of the league. He deserves a chance, but we all know the story there. So we're not even going to talk about that. That's another story for another day. Keeping with the theme of the Broncos quarterback situation, we all know that Denver has their sights set on Kirk Cousins. That's plan A, bar none, is Kirk Cousins. Now, I like Kirk Cousins, but the only thing that gives me reservations about Kirk Cousins is the price tag that he potentially is going to come with. We've seen reports, of basically the Broncos are going to have to pay him anywhere from, $20 to $30 million a year just to even get this dude to even look at him. And, with all of the needs that Denver has right now, when you're a 5-11 team, you're more than just a quarterback away from reaching the Super Bowl. And while Kirk Cousins is a really, really good quarterback and the numbers say so, I don't think I'm on board with paying a guy upwards of $25, $30 million a year, especially on a 3-year deal, which has been rumored is what he's seeking. So, that gives me pause. Me personally, you have to bring him in and talk numbers. You'd be a fool not to at least kick the tires. But, man, the price tag, and I know everybody says the quarterback market, it is what it is. I get that. But at some point, this quarterback bubble has got to burst. This is crazy. It's hard to build a team, especially when you're in Denver shoes. It's hard to build a team when you've already got Von Miller's massive contract on the books. You got Demaryius Thomas's contract on the books, which they are restructuring. We get that. It's hard to build a good team / great team when the majority of your contracts is tied up in, anywhere from 2 to 4 players. So that makes it extremely challenging. And I get it. You basically, winning and success comes with the cost in the NFL. I get that. But still, it gives me pause paying somebody, $25 or $30 million a year, for a deal that's, 3 or 4 years. Now, if you spread that out to 5 to 7 years, then I can stomach that a little bit better. But, in the NFL, it all comes down to guaranteed money. So it's going to be interesting to see how this Kirk Cousins situation plays out. Now, I will say, if the Broncos do land Kirk Cousins, then me personally, if they get Kirk Cousins, because the core of the defense is still there, even though they traded Aqib Talib. They got Bradley Roby. Who they feel is ready to step in as a starter. So the core of the defense is still there. Well, we still have to see with the D-line. Derek Wolfe, that situation might be up in the air with his neck issues in the past. And then also just this past year in 2017, both him, Jared Crick, and Billy Wynn, all three of those guys wound up on injured reserve. So they are going to have to do some retooling along the defensive line. As far as the linebacker core goes, we still have Brandon Marshall, but, even last year he was kind of a shell of himself. He definitely wasn't in 2015 form when, dude was flying all over the place and was covering tight ends. Well, both him and Danny Trevathan, that linebacker core in 2015 was one of the best. I mean, that was part of what made that defense, that 2015 Broncos defense, historically great, was the play by Brandon Marshall and Danny Trevathan. They have Corey Nelson and Todd Davis, who are going to be free agents this year. I believe they're restricted free agents, if I remember right. So don't know what's going to happen with them. We do know that the Broncos want those guys back, but that's not a guarantee at this point in the offseason. So Denver's got some retooling to do in that defense, but the core is still there. They just exercised Chris Harris Jr.'s $1.1 million option. So they've definitely got that particular aspect of the defense locked down. By the way, Chris Harris Jr. is the best cornerback in the league. I don't care what anybody else says. Chris Harris Jr. is as good as they come. And if you look at his stats, and this is not something that it was just a one-year type of deal. Consistently over the last 3 or 4 years, Chris Harris Jr. has been the best cornerback in the National Football League. Going back to Kirk Cousins, if they do land Kirk Cousins, I do believe Kirk Cousins gets the Broncos at least on the cusp of the playoffs. I mean, they still have a lot of unanswered questions. Even on offense, we still have questions along the line and, see what's going to happen there. Now, if they get Kirk Cousins, that gives them the freedom with all the draft capital they got with that fifth rounder. That gives them 11 picks total in the draft. So John Elway has a lot of draft capital to make something happen. So if they land Cousins with that first pick, that number 5 pick in the first round, that gives them a ton of flexibility in the way they could go. A lot of people throw out Quentin Nelson's name out of Notre Dame. I've even heard some people throw out Will Hernandez's name out of UTEP. That gives them a lot of flexibility along the line to make some improvements with those two gentlemen right there. But of course, this is all gonna hinge on what Kirk Cousins decides to do. Now, of course, if Kirk Cousins signs with the Vikings, which has been a heavily circulated rumor, if he goes that route, well, the Broncos, they have either Baker Mayfield, Josh Rosen, Josh Allen, or Sam Darnold as the 4, I guess, cream of the crop guys as far as the quarterback goes in this draft. Me personally, I'm on board with Baker Mayfield or Josh Rosen, either one of those guys. Now, with Baker Mayfield, you hear about the intangibles and the competitive fire and, how he was a 2-time walk-on and he, basically his whole life he's had to persist among people telling him he couldn't do this, he couldn't do that. Kind of like Tim Tebow back in the day. But we won't go there because when you bring up that name to Broncos fans or football fans in general, man, that dude, he's one of the most polarizing figures basically in NFL history. But, that's another story for another day. Anyway, it's almost like the Tim Tebow situation in that regard with Baker Mayfield is, Baker Mayfield has dealt with a lot of adversity. We hear people, we've heard the stories of people telling him he couldn't do this, he couldn't do that. Then he walked on at OU and then, he lit it up at OU. And now people are saying that the big thing that's going to hold him back is the height and the hand size and this and that and the other. I mean, look, I'm not that kind of guy to get into those details and those kind of intangibles and stuff like that. That kind of stuff to me doesn't really matter. I mean, of course, the guy has to have good measurements and good numbers. But if you can, me personally, I believe either you can play or you can't. And especially if you're not a hard worker, you can have the most talent and the best measurables in the world. But if you don't work and you don't hone your craft, then it's going to be a waste anyway. We know Baker Mayfield is an extremely hard worker, so you don't have to worry about that. Now, the red flags that you do have to worry about with Baker Mayfield is we all know about the incident with the police, with him running from the police in Arkansas or wherever it was. And, now the thing is, you heard people say at the combine, he lit the interviews up. He turned on the charm. He had all the right things to say and this and that and the other. You've heard people address him as Johnny Manziel 2.0. And if we remember back to when Manziel was going through the combine process, he did the exact same thing. He said all the right things to the teams. Some teams fell in love with him, blah, 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 blah. And then we see what happened there. So that does give some people some pause with Baker Mayfield, and, that's understandable, rightfully so. As far as Josh Rosen, he's had some question marks of his own as well, as far as his personality and him not getting along with teammates and, basically him being a rich, spoiled kid and this and that and the other. But when you look at Josh Rosen on tape, he's your prototypical quarterback that these NFL teams love. He's 6'4", 6'5", got great size, got a great arm, and he's a very smart quarterback. So he's what teams drool over when it comes to quarterbacks. So you have those two men right there that Denver has a chance to go after with the number 5 pick. So it's going to be interesting to see what plays out with the Broncos starting next week. The legal tampering period starts on March 12th, but free agency starts on March 14th, which I believe is next Wednesday. So that would make the 12th next Monday. So, Denver, John Elway is at a crossroads right now because he is in a position where he has to get this right. And no matter which direction Denver goes with the quarterback position, whether it's free agency or landing somebody in the draft, they got to get this right. Because if you really step back and you really look at it, Denver has never drafted a franchise quarterback. John Elway wasn't drafted by the Broncos. The Baltimore Colts drafted him, and he was landed in a trade. Of course, everybody knows they didn't draft Peyton Manning. He came over from the Colts after they cut him like yesterday's garbage after his 4 neck surgeries. Even Jake Plummer, who was one of the better quarterbacks that the Broncos have had, the Broncos didn't draft him. He came over from Arizona. So this is John Elway's chance, basically, to right the ship at the quarterback position. And as far as free agents go, even if they don't get Kirk Cousins, it's not the end of the world. There's still Case Keenum, which, me personally, if he comes with the right price tag, of course, he's just going to be a bridge player. But if he comes with the right price tag, I'm all for it. Because last year was his best year of his career. And it's kind of one of those things where it's like, okay, well, is this something where Case Keenum finally caught fire, or is this just a one-year anomaly? So you never really know in a situation like that. They've got Keenum that's out there. They got Teddy Bridgewater, who, if he rehabs the right way from his injury, Teddy Bridgewater, I still remember that game against the Broncos in 2015 in Week 3 where he shredded the Broncos defense that game. He shredded them. And the only reason why Denver ended up winning that game was because at the very end of it, T.J. Ward came around the edge and got the sack fumble, which, of course, was recovered by Von Miller. And Denver went on to win that game by a close score. I can't even remember what the score was, but I definitely remember that play. And I remember Teddy Bridgewater passing all over and running all over that 2015 defense. So Teddy B is a baller, and if he recovers from this knee injury, this freak injury that he suffered, if he recovers from that, I can't talk. If he recovers from that 100%, Teddy B is going to be a baller. And I would love to have that guy in the quarterback room in Denver, Colorado, and Dove Valley. So, if that's an option that's out there for the Broncos. Some people have floated out Sam Bradford's name, but I am completely against that. That dude is glass. That dude can't stay healthy to save his life. So if the Broncos avoid Sam Bradford, I'm perfectly okay with that. So without that, the Broncos have plenty of options that they can go, and plenty of ways that they could go, different ways that they can go when it comes to this quarterback situation. They got a lot of holes to fill in Denver, and of course, they're not going to be all taken care of in 1 year, unfortunately. But, as John Elway said at the Combine, life is too short to rebuild in the NFL. So, in the NFL, if you're not shooting for a championship every single year, which is something that the Broncos do, if you're not shooting for a championship every single year, you're going to have a long, long, long road in the NFL and plenty of long days. So this is something that, it's going to be interesting to see what happens with the Broncos. And this is going to be an offseason that is going to be critically important to the direction of the Broncos franchise, both now and in the future. So Broncos history will definitely be made this offseason. So I'm excited to see what happens because when they got blew out in the Super Bowl by Seattle back in February of 2014, we all know what happened with that free agent class that year. They grabbed DeMarcus Ware, Aqib Talib, TJ Ward. They released Champ Bailey to my dismay because I love Champ. They released him because of age and injury. Then they grabbed Bradley Roby, who's turned into one of the best corners in the league. So, when John Elway gets embarrassed the season before, he definitely comes out swinging the next offseason. So Broncos fans have a lot to be excited for this offseason, and I can't wait to get it started. Well, that's going to do it for episode 1 of Humble Beginnings, the Undrafted Podcast. I'm Roushell Hamilton Jr. Thank God for this opportunity. This is something I've had so much fun in doing this. This has been amazing, and I thank God for the gift and the opportunity to do so. I want to thank you for taking time out of your day, out of your night, out of your life to listen to me in my little space of the podcast universe. Stay tuned for episode 2 coming up next week. We'll have more issues and topics, football related, sports related, in some cases even life related. We'll be here to discuss more. In the meantime, be safe, don't text, don't drive, and God bless.